Scherst here, and what I'd like to do is just take a little bit of time here today and just go through the basic router with some of the beginners in woodworking and that. Maybe you're not familiar with the router, or perhaps you're wondering if it's worth having a router or whatever. So this is what I want to do today, is just go through the basics of a router and how to use it, because there is some things that you should know about a router before you attempt using it. Right off the bat with routers, it is vitally important that you invest in a good quality bit, a carbide type bit. And as you can see, this one here has a bearing on it, and the idea of that bearing is as this turns, that your bearing runs along the side of your project that you're routering out, and only allows that cutter to cut so deep into the project, giving you the preferred edge that you like to do. And you can do so many different things depending on the type of cutter that you actually use. Now, one thing with the router bit, I recommend that when you buy bits, buy a good carbide type bit, which, as you can see, this is here. And what you'll find, that carbide tip will last longer, do a nicer job, and serve you well throughout, especially when you come into doing hardwoods and things of that nature. You need a good quality bit to do the cutting. Now, these bits travel at quite a high speed of rate, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 22,000 RPM and up, depending on your router. So as you know, this bit is really flying when you're using it. So it is very important to practice safe practices when using the router, because they can be dangerous if you're not in control of it. So this is something that I would highly recommend, is being careful when you're using that router. In router bits, as you can see, you can buy various amounts of different profiles and that of the router bit for doing different profiles on your projects and that. There's all different types of router bits, and there's always a good use for any of them. Such as this one here, it's a 3/4, just a straight cut bit. And say like if you wanted to make a duplicate copy of maybe of some certain thing for your project and that, you would use a bit like this here, along with a cup like this here that would fit over top into your router, and this here would rest along your template. This here would go along and trim off the rough cut on the lower piece that you're trying to duplicate, giving you a perfect duplication. So there's the way you can go there, as well as both of these here. You can get this type of cutter here with a bearing on the bottom or a bearing on the top. There's various different combinations of router bits, so depending on what your application might be. Now, what I'd like to do is just demonstrate how the router itself works. In this particular case here, I've just got a 1/4 inch cove bit in here with a bearing here, which will just maintain the depth of that router bit in my project. Now, when you look from the top down of a router, the router always turns clockwise. Now, that is very important to know, because when you're passing your router through your workpiece and that, it is important that you go around your workpiece counterclockwise. And the reason for that is, if you look at a bit like this here, and the cutter over here on the edge, this bit turns clockwise with the router at a very high speed. Now, when you go around your workpiece counterclockwise, opposite to that, you will find this cutter has a tendency to suck inwards toward your project, giving you a nice even finish. Now, if you were to go clockwise around your project, the same as your router is turning, it has a tendency to push this away from your project, giving you a very uneven finish, so to speak. So clockwise the router, counterclockwise around the project. Now I'm just going to fire up this router just to show you how it works. One thing I will recommend that you have a good set of earplugs, or such as what I'm using here, muffs or whatever. A router traveling at the speed it does gives a high-pitched sound, which is very hard on your ears. So I recommend, if you're doing much routing at all, you should always maintain wearing proper equipment for it. Alright, as you can see here, we've put an edge on here with that bit. It's just a 1/4 inch round over, which gives you a nice edge. But you can use different types of bits, giving you different profiles for that particular application. But just to demonstrate how that worked, and as you notice, I started at the bottom and worked my way up counterclockwise on the project, which had a tendency to suck that bit in towards the project to give you a nice even cut throughout. Now this size router I find to be the handiest to have around the shop, because it's so flexible, and yet it's not overly heavy enough to use this type of thing, but nevertheless you still want to make sure you're in control of it. That's why they have 2 handles on there, and that's why you should hang on to it with 2 hands, because a router out of control is bad news. Alright, now when we're looking, that is what you look at as a standard router. Okay, this one here is what we call a plunge router. Now the difference is, if you try to do some plunging with this standard router, you'll find it's very difficult to get started in here, and say if you're cutting a groove down the center or dado or whatever, it's very hard to get it precisely in location to start out, and it can be a little dangerous, because this thing can go wherever it decides on you if you're not careful. Now this particular router here that I have, I use it for cutting in the dados on your stair stringers and that, and that's where it works really well. And as I won't fire it up here because it is quite noisy, but what you do is locate it, say through the center here where you like. I'll just demonstrate here on the end if you can see that. And then you push it down. You set your router here to the depth that you want. There's stops on the side here and everything. You can adjust that to the depth you want. You would push that down and then lock it there. And then from there, you would just start and router down your piece, which would go the depth you want, and you can start and stop wherever you want on that. It works great for fluting maybe uprights on the fireplace, or like I say, this here I use it for doing stair stringers and that. So it has its purpose too. Okay, I hope that this has demonstrated the router for you, and good luck in using it.